You know, the UPSC Civil Services exam, it's one of the toughest in the world. We're talking a success rate of less than 0.2%. So when someone doesn't just clear it, but nails it on their very first try, you gotta pay attention. In this explainer, we're diving deep into the strategy of Subhankar Pathak to see how he cracked the code. Okay, let's just let that sink in for a second. That number on your screen, 11, that was Subhankar's All India rank, and he got it on his first attempt. That's just incredible. It immediately makes you ask, okay, how on earth did he do that? And this quote, this really gets to the heart of his entire philosophy. In a world where aspirants are literally drowning in study materials and online videos, his strategy was built on a pretty radical idea. You don't need more stuff, you just need the right stuff. You need just enough. So, how did he do it? We're going to break his whole game plan down into 5 key parts. First, we'll talk about his less is more philosophy. Then we'll look at how he balanced the mains and his optional subject. After that, we'll get into his really clever note-making strategy, the art of answer writing, and finally, we'll tackle the biggest psychological hurdle that he calls inertia. So let's start with the foundation, the biggest mental shift you have to make. For most people trying to crack this exam, the instinct is to just gather everything. More books, more videos, more notes. Subhankar's strategy completely flips that on its head. Now, here's where it gets really interesting and kind of counterintuitive. He was a working professional when he started, which means he was always short on time. But you know what? He says that was the best thing that ever happened to him. It forced him to be absolutely ruthless with his focus and only study what was essential. No fluff. And this slide really boils it down. You've got 2 paths. On one side, you can chase after every piece of material out there. On the other, you focus on one thing, clearing the exam. His advice is so simple but so powerful. Figure out what's most important and do that thing over and over and over again. Master it. Don't just collect information. Okay, so once you've got that less is more mindset locked in, how do you actually structure your preparation? This brings us to his really smart 2-track model for handling the mains and your optional subject. He is absolutely crystal clear on this point. The mains is the real exam. That's what determines your rank. So your prep has to reflect that from day 1. Don't put it off. Start your optional subject at the same time as your general studies. Your goal should be to finish that entire optional syllabus and revise it at least once before you even sit for the prelims. Why? Because that precious time after prelims is for revision and practice, not learning brand new stuff for the first time. All right, so we have the philosophy, we have the schedule. Now let's get tactical. How do you deal with the daily flood of information, especially from newspapers, without ending up with mountains of notes you'll never look at again? His method here is just so efficient. First, he didn't just guess what was important. He watched expert analysis videos to learn how they pick out key topics. Then, and this is the genius part, he didn't summarize whole articles. He only looked for the unique bits, a great story, a powerful quote, things that the monthly summary magazines would probably miss. He'd save those little gems in a really simple place, like a WhatsApp group just for himself. And for all the basic concepts, he just trusted the high-quality curated materials to do the heavy lifting. And this is why that system is so brilliant. He makes a really crucial point here. The whole purpose of a note is for you to remember it under pressure. That's why he says you shouldn't just blindly copy someone else's notes, even a topper's. Their notes are for their weak spots, not yours. Your own personal, targeted notes are what will stick in your brain when it counts. Okay, the second critical tactic is answer writing. He says this is the point where everything changes. It's when you go from just being a consumer of information to an active creator of arguments. It's a total game changer. I want you to really think about this for a second. How does your brain actually start to work differently when you make a habit of writing answers every single day? Here's what happens. It's like your brain gets a software update. You're not just reading an article anymore. You're actively hunting. You're scanning for a potential intro, a killer statistic for an argument, or a perfect point for a conclusion. You start to see all information through the filter of how you can actually use it. And to really understand how critical this skill is when the pressure is on, Subhankar told this story about his toughest moment in the entire exam process, the ethics paper. I mean, just look at this timeline. He was in an absolute pressure cooker. 45 minutes into a 3-hour exam, he'd only managed to attempt 2 case studies, and panic was setting in. He said he was just scrambling until the very last second, barely finishing the paper. He walked out feeling like he had just written the worst ethics paper of his life. So what did he score in that paper? The one he thought he'd completely bombed. 105. That is a very, very solid score. So despite the panic, despite feeling like he failed, he did great. How? The lesson here is so powerful and so simple. Finishing the paper is absolutely non-negotiable. All that practice he did allowed him to keep writing, even when his brain was screaming. Think about it. If you don't answer a question, you get a 0. An imperfect answer can still get you decent marks. Completing the paper is everything. And that brings us to the final and maybe the most profound piece of this whole puzzle. It's not a tactic or a schedule. It's about the deep psychological battle that every single aspirant has to fight. Subhankar calls this the inertia factor, and he says it's the hardest part of the whole journey. It's that internal resistance, that paralysis by analysis that just stops you cold before you can even start on the things you know you need to do. And this inertia, it pops up everywhere, doesn't it? That feeling of agonizing over which newspaper to read, so you end up reading none. Debating endlessly about old versus new NCERT books instead of just starting one. Being afraid you don't know enough to start writing answers, or putting off mock tests. Sound familiar? And this slide just says it all. The real competition isn't won by the person with the fanciest notes or the longest book list. It's won by the people who can fight through that friction and just start. The ability to overcome that inertia day in and day out, that's what separates the winners from everyone else. So we'll leave you with this question. You have the blueprint now. The strategy from a top ranker who did it on his first attempt is laid out right in front of you. The only question left is, what barrier, what little hesitation, what piece of inertia are you going to break